Department of Natural Resources, Floodplain Management Unit. First, a little housekeeping. We are in listen-only mode, so please make sure your mic is muted. If you're having a Wi-Fi issues, you may want to turn off your camera and any other programs you have running. Please be sure to make note of the chat feature on your screen. Please use the chat for communication, as we will not be taking questions by audio. Aaron Kyle of Dewberry is monitoring the chat and will try to help you with any technical matters. We are offering one continuing education credit for CFMs. To receive the credit, you must be logged in separately, answer all poll questions during this session, and provide your name and email at the end of the presentation. Please use the radio buttons to respond to the poll questions either in the pop-up window or the chat box. A copy of the presentation will be emailed to all attendees. Also, a survey link will be provided at the end of the presentation. We appreciate you completing the survey so that we may improve these webinars in the future. We are recording today's webinar and plan to post the video to georgiadfirm.com. With that, let's get started. Today we have a presentation about the history of flooding in Georgia and what to do after that disaster. Our presenter is Brian Schown. Mr. Schown has worked in the state of Georgia for the past 30 years at 5 local communities, 1 private engineering firm, and now works for the state of Georgia's floodplain unit. He holds 2 bachelor's degrees, 2 professional engineering licenses, and a certified floodplain manager certificate. He has taught over 100 classes with topics ranging from retaining walls, pavement construction, stormwater conveyance, stormwater quality, and of course, floodplain management. And with that, I'll now turn it over to Brian.
Howdy, I'm Brian. I'm gonna try to avoid, I got lights blasting at me, and I'll try to avoid having reflections popping back up at you. So, welcome. History of flooding and what to do after it. So here we jump into the history, clicker, and get moving along here. Yep, tornadoes aren't necessarily flooding, but usually with tornadoes, there's thunderstorms and rain. So we've had over 1,500 tornadoes in the state since 1950. It's a nice big number. I've got numbers for thunderstorms and stuff like that. They seem awful small thinking year to year, but 1,500, that's a sizable amount. They also have wreaked a lot of damage and destruction, say, in one area of the state in 2000, 21 dead. 3 years later, 6 more dead, with lots of homes damaged. We also have tropical storms and federal declared disasters. I'm trying to get out of the side here. I'll move over so you can see. Looking at various things, Alberta is one I was in. That I survived going through back in 1994. But Georgia has been under a federal declared disaster since 1990, has had one running at least every year. And in some instances, they have 3 or 4 or 5 running at the same time. So we've had declarations just running all the time. And that's 34 years now. That's a nice long time. So we have disasters happening all over the state. Here, I ran across a picture. This one probably did pop up as a disaster. Couldn't really find it. But I found an aerial shot of flood. This is the satellite kind of pass over, the mapping stuff that Google does. Things like that, and I've got a nice big floodplain going through. This is up at, and get the right elevation, which you can't see. That line right there is the Tennessee-Georgia boundary, so Chattanooga area. But it's showing how just, in essence, a little flood, not a lot of houses out in there. It's just flooding up the area, but it is a flood to keep up with. Here's a little picture gathered from from FEMA's service information and put together by the Pew Charitable Trust. How much floodplain is in your jurisdiction or in your county? Naturally, down along the coast, a lot more floodplain, less in other areas, but everybody's got at least 5% of their land mass is in floodplain. You also have thunderstorms. Here, I've got a list of just different declarations, thunderstorms and flooding. How many counties are impacted? And these are declared disasters as you're going through those. But the biggest one, besides, I think, Irma and Michael hurricanes, those hit the entire area, but my data didn't go as far as those. 119 counties in 1998. Thunderstorms, it seems like a low number. 50 to 55 thunderstorms a year. Why have that many? How much damage and stuff like that? But 50 days, that's a month of July and half of August as you go through. Savannah is in the top 20. The highest one, I think, is Tampa, and it's in the hundreds per year. So it's just keeping up with these thunderstorms that roll in. I remember when I was working in DeKalb County, we had 3 thunderstorms occurring in the area of Tucker City, that's there now. Same house got flooded 3 times in 4 months in the same year. Just by a little thunderstorm parking and dumping water in one location. It's something to keep up with. Here, yep, we've got the big peaks. As we go through, let me get my little mousey on this. We got the big peaks going through. Yep, they're all the big ones. And I'm kind of in the way of these over here, but it's pretty much every year, somebody who has flood insurance makes a claim. Every year. It's those little things that tend to get in the way. Trying to keep up with those. So you could have rain. Where I was in Decatur, in in DeKalb County, it never rained in Decatur at the office, but it poured down rain in Tucker. And that's not that many miles away. General claims since 1972. Zone A, high, AE, we've got more of that, so it's sitting up there. But Zone X, they're coming in second place. We have a fair number of Zone X properties. It's nowhere near the floodplain that we think of. But they're in a drainage problem area where they get flooded. So, poll question, have I jumped into it too quick? Probably have, because I'm just zipping right along. I don't even know what time it is. 9 minutes, this is bad. That was supposed to take a half hour. So, kind of waiting. Emily? Somebody?
Hey, I got you. I'm going to launch the poll now. The question is, should you be aware about the weather occurring in your jurisdiction? And if you want to receive 1 hour of CFM continuing education credit, please answer the poll question using the buttons in the pop-up on your screen. And if that does not appear, then please check your chat. Just going to give a few moments for everyone to review the question and send in their answers.
Thank you, Erin. Sorry I surprised you, and I'm you know, this whole presentation was supposed to take an hour, and now I'm going to do it in 15 minutes. So I'm going to have to elaborate a little more. But when I came to work for the state, now I'm in floodplain. I don't mess with that silly stormwater stuff or things like that. But technically, all stormwater problems are flood problems also. We take care of the stormwater problems, flooding here, there, we use in the same terms, flooding, problem areas, washouts. All of that occurs during a flood and during stormwater events. So we got to, we have to include those. Fixing little drainage problems here and there. If it harms a house, harms a road, it's things we have to look into. And I'm kind of giving away the answer. Yeah, you need to keep up with where it's raining in your area. And I will go to my app. It says don't have a location. Checking the weather. You really can't see that too well. But I keep up with the weather. See how it's going, stuff like that. And I do have this little graph thing that pops up. And according to the National Weather Service, we got rain coming in on Saturday. Which you can't see anything on here, but I can tell you rain's coming in on Saturday. Where I am, when it comes, that kind of stuff, as it comes through. But the better item is the little maps. And there's no rain here. Let me see if there's any rain in the country. Oh, we got some out here near Kansas. You can see where the rain is as going through. So you say, oh, we might be in a watch area, warning, watch areas, pull up the maps and see where the rain is, see where it parks, stuff like that. Also, with the National Weather Service, they're doing a fine job on there. They came out with, it's not two-pole, but that's the only thing I can think of. They can see this way and they see this way. And they can see density of things. So they can see debris flying, they can see hail, they can see intensity of rain. So prior to having that, they basically topped out at about 1 inch per hour. That was a really bad storm if they announced 1 inch an hour. I had one pop up recently. It was the last rainstorm here. 4 inches an hour popped in as an intensity that came down. Unfortunately, my little rain gauge out back didn't get no 4 inches. It might have been that intense for a very short amount of time, but it would have been nice to get the 4 inches, but not in 1 hour as it goes along. So having those intensities and being able to see where flooding could occur, if it's big, widespread, yeah, you can see the maps. You go out to the entire jurisdiction and hunt for stuff. But what about a little rainstorm over there, just a mile away, or even less than a mile away? I'll pick on a group. It's called Coco Ross. COCORAHS, maybe not the A. And they're but collaborative community, collaborative rain hill snow network. So I got a big rain gauge out back, and I report the rain every morning, except this morning I forgot, even though I got a little rain yesterday. So I'll put it in. But there's several of us here in Peachtree City because, well, we got the weather station. Atlanta weather station is actually in Peachtree City. So we've got several people who have this little rain gauge. sitting in their backyard, and we're relatively close. There's like 4 of us, 3 or 4 of us, real close. And they can report rain, get a half inch of rain. I don't get a drop, and they're less than a mile away. It might get black. I got a window over in this direction. Might get black outside, nothing pours down, but it all comes down. It was a few years ago when everything poured down on the north side of Peachtree City, and on the south side, we didn't get anything. Dry as a bone, hard as a brick. Wasn't until later on that we started getting rains that they didn't. But just having rain a mile away, you could have a lot and you get nothing. Just a mile away on how the rain comes through. That heavy rain may cause upper end flooding of houses in the flood zone. Got to go after those, which ends up one of my questions. So these upcoming questions, what to do, jump right into them after event. I got sinus problems too, so I could say Broken Egg Cafe, but nobody wants to go there. They're not really sponsoring this presentation, but they are in Tuscaloosa for those who say Roll Tide. Back to that's intermission. Back to our regular program. When homes get damaged or when businesses get damaged, do you sit back and wait for them to come in to get their building permits? How many people come in and get stuff? I joined DeKalb County after the 2009 heavy flooding in around the Atlanta area. And I did ask the building inspector one time, did they get a lot of permits coming in? And they said, no, nothing really changed, not an increase or anything like that. It was almost like a whole bunch of people cleaned out their houses, put the stuff back, didn't bother with a building permit, didn't get caught. They kind of let it go. But during that time, it was a heavy push for construction and other things going on. So they might have just missed it. Do your residents always come in to get their building permits for working in the floodplain? They're coming in, replacing carpet, adding a room. Well, let's see, redoing the sheetrock, putting down new floor. Do they get permits for that stuff? Yeah, maybe not, because they're thinking of building permit stuff. Change out a door, that tends to pop it. But do your residents normally come in to get building permits? That's the question. And if they get flooded, they get damaged, and they're in the floodplain, well, you're required to issue permits, even if you can't find them. So do you also go out? So do you wait for them, or do you go out and look for the buildings that are damaged? So we have, in a big flood, we're looking for flooded houses, but when it's a tornado or a thunderstorm, you can look for houses that had roofs blown off, walls collapse, trees fall on houses, all sorts of stuff like that. We generally send out, when we get a declared disaster, and we've had some recently, that here at the state we send out letters. And I remember one response saying that nobody's been flooded in our jurisdiction, we'll keep up with it. It's, were they damaged in the floodplain? If they're in the floodplain, any kind of damage, then that's what you're having to figure out and go after. I do know Liberty County does go out after different disasters, thunderstorms, tornadoes, that kind of thing, floods. They go after, and they have zones, and they've got groups that will go out through the county and hunt for houses structures that were damaged. And I kind of dabbled into this one when implementing, and we're looking at the substantial damage clause. Pretty much everybody in their jurisdiction has structures that are non-compliant with the current rules. That's when this thing kicks in. If the structure is non-compliant, then we're looking at bringing those houses, buildings into compliance with the current rules. So that's the substantial damage clause. But if we only think of, well, it's got to be flooded to kick in this clause. Does it only have to be flooded? And let me jump to the next slide. Oh, I got it covered on that next slide. So when you're doing it, are you only thinking about floods? Well, substantial damage applies to damage of any kind. So I just started rattling stuff off. I threw in termites because I had termites in a house once. Water leak inside. My neighbor had a water leak. They're still discussing, fancy term, with the insurance company. We're not in the floodplain. We're not in the special flood hazard area. We're in zone X, but they're still in discussions. Car drives through the wall. Just read about the falling space debris that hit a house. Who pays for it? Plane crashes, gas explosions. We've had some earthquakes. New York has. Water main breaks in the way of civil unrest. Shootouts, stuff like that. All of that's damage to the structure, and that applies. All of that stuff does. Anything that goes on, it applies to the structure. Now, the one thing that does not apply is if the house has decayed over time enough where things have just broken down from either lack of use or use, whatever, and it's a health hazard. Document that it's a health hazard. They can fix that health hazard, and it doesn't go up against substantial damage, having to improve the entire structure. So you just fix that, but it's got to be before the damage occurs. It's got to be cited first as you go along. So here's all the things that go on that are included. I had a house that was burnt down in DeKalb County, actually two of them. One was in the floodway, which in the Metropolitan North Georgia Water Planning District's model ordinance, no development in the floodway, unless it has to be houses, you're kicked out. So if you have a house in the floodway, it burns down and you can't put it back. So that one house couldn't go back. Burnt to the ground, gone, scraped it off, and go back. Had another house that burnt. It was not in the floodway, so they could build back. And they actually had a clause in their home insurance that said, in their regular home insurance, no flood insurance, that said if there were higher standards they had to build to, then home insurance would pay. So home insurance paid to have an improved foundation and elevate the house up and put everything up a tad higher as things go along. Well, I'm doing a little better on my time. That's good. Back to broken egg here. Sorry, intermission there. Got sinus drainage or allergy, whichever one is messing me up. But here we have damages that occur. as it comes in. You got to keep up with all that. So all of this could occur. I do like the water main break. There was big ones in DeKalb County, pick on them again. And it washed out the road, it flooded into businesses. Had they been in the special flood hazard area and had insurance, the insurance would pay. Their stuff would pay because flood insurance pays for when you get flooded. It doesn't pay when tornado blows the roof off. But gosh, my brain just left, went out of town. Got too many things going on. But you got damage through there, any kind. You got to find it. So you're looking for places that burn down, that come in. So in essence, whenever a building permit comes in, regardless of what they're trying to do, it needs to hit the floodplain review to see if they're in the special flood hazard area and see if they're non-compliant, which pops up in my to-do list, because what do you do after the event? There's a whole bunch of other things you do, but we're talking about this SD stuff because FEMA's coming down on it. It's going to pop us. One time we'll finally have a nice big flood or something like that, and FEMA's going to visit. But they're visiting down in Florida, still down in there. So what to do after? And I'm picking on a flood event primarily. Tornadoes, hurricane, well, tornadoes, high winds, stuff like that. Everybody knows it's house insurance that pays for that. But in a flood period, you'll have people saying, oh, I got flooded because of something else. County, city, you fix that. So be ready for angry people. It's going to happen. Those angry people are going to talk to your bosses, the political elected officials. They're going to come back and visit you. I've been through one. And it was my first job as a county engineer. Went to a meeting, I wasn't told to be there, I just went and showed up. And the crowd was ready to throw the NFIP out the door. Just said, we don't want this law at all. We don't want FEMA's help. We don't want county help. We just throw it all away, be done with it. Let us get on with our life. Very angry crowd. And the county administrator, he knew I was up in the crowd. And the question came up and he said, oh, our county engineer is here. He'll answer that for you. So I got thrown up into a very big mass of angry people. Well, just to say I survived that because I'm here today. That was 30 years ago. So I'm still here today. And in that location that I was in, be ready to be told not to enforce the rules. It's amazing how often that pops up. But pretty often, if it's a huge disaster, there's a big chance to say, no, we throw out the rules, let the people build back as best they can. Let's get them back to the way they were. And you can't throw out the rules. They got to be here. Whether it's a huge event or a little bitty single house flooding event. Creek floods, hits one house, you don't throw out the rules just because there's a whole lot of angry people coming to visit, knocking on your door, stuff like that. You also need to know the ins and outs of your ordinance, the enforcement, especially this SD portion, how to get through it. And the biggest thing to do here, what to do, stay calm. It'll blow over. There's people all over the country that have to deal with this all the time. As far as I know, nobody's been killed over it. There's a lot of people after that, after they experience a big flood or something, to pack up and say, we don't want to do this anymore. And they, especially us engineers, we pack up and go someplace else where it's less likely to have a problem. Move around some. But staying calm, having confidence in you know what you're doing. Back to know the ordinance, know how to get things done, that kind of thing. And staying calm about it. We at the state, we can come and support you on that, help you out with it, give you more training, things like that. So on the SD analysis, what do you do? Well, you got to know which structures are damaged. So to me, in dry weather, I'm trying to point up here, but my finger's disappearing. So we'll use this guy. Here we go. Maybe this one should be first. So in dry weather, you find out all your structures that are compliant or not compliant. Because if they're compliant with all your rules, even if they get damaged, even if they're substantially damaged, they can build back exactly the way they were. Everything's fine. They don't have to do anything different. It's the non-compliant structures that have to do something different. So find out if your structures are compliant or non-compliant, and that's best to do during the sunny day time period instead of later on, because if they're non-compliant and they get flooded, they have a tendency, the homeowners, structure owners, strip everything out, remove all this stuff, rip it all away. You won't know with how much was compliant or non-compliant if you're thinking only of elevation. Do they have flood vents? Do they have flood resistant material below the BFE plus freeboard? So you're up at design flood elevation, as the ASCE and building folks call it. From there down, you have flood resistant materials. Is the air conditioner condenser unit up high enough? Do you have the HVAC piping up? That kind of stuff to make it compliant. Is that there? So you got find out non-compliant houses, how much are they damaged? And then to figure out how much they're damaged, cost and that kind of stuff, that's an entirely different webinar. It'll take 2 or 3 days, maybe 2 or 3 webinars. I'll try to shorten it to less than that. You also need to know for the SD to kick in, value of structure and the cost of the damage. If the cost of the damage exceeds 50% of the structure, then you got to bring it into compliance. And I'm blocking the way of the time limit clause. Some people have none, as in per each event. So if you have 4 events in 1 year, it's each event that you keep up with. Other communities have 2, 5, 10 lifetime that goes along, so you keep all those numbers together as you go through it. So you got to have that clause because that would add to the value of the damage as you go through. Value of the structure, value of the damage over that 50%, which I don't have a half right here. I got here as a half, so there's about half. So you're here or higher, got to comply. You also need to know the rules that they need to rebuild by. If they're in a zone A, do we have elevations? We got a whole bunch of BLE stuff in the state now. We do have zone A's that we call model backed, and we have elevations in those. It's just not printed on the map, on the FEMA flood map. So find out what the BFEs are for your houses, especially the lower ones. One's more likely to get flooded by these little storms that come through. know all the inspections that are required and all your paperwork. Now, in the building code, in our ICC, IBC, IRC codes, they've got inspections that are required, paperwork. You also have the stuff in our flood ordinance. It says, it doesn't explicitly state you inspect at certain times, but it says you got to have things done. So you do have to make inspections. Go along. Just checking my time. In the analysis or in through the area, you keep up with everything, you render your verdict. Oh, it is substantially improved, damaged. You got to comply. They complain, so you need to know the appeals process as it goes along. So as you may get it all written out, have a nice written out schedule of what to do, how to do it, who to contact. The preference would be who in your organization do you actually talk to, the person's name, rather than just a position and phone number and stuff like that, knowing that you have to update that every time the different people change. One thing that kicked in when I was back in 94, a lot of people added on to their houses, not just repair the damages, but if they were going to be out of their house for 4, 5, 6 months, might as well add on their upgrades. That would be substantial improvement. So you would have the damage clause and they might be at 40%, but if they add 20% onto the structure, then they have to come into compliance. So initially you might issue the permit for them just to repair. Then they come back and they add on a room to the outside. You say, sorry. And they might have already finished all the repairs there. And they say, we want to add on to a room. And you've got that. And they're still working. You haven't closed out that permit for the initial part of the house. And they want to add on a room. That dollar goes against the original. And it'll pop them over. So you kind of need to know if they're going to fix the house, are they going to expand things? One reason why they were a lot of folks back in 94 expanded or improved their houses was one fellow told me he had a fairly new house, had a mortgage for it, and he said that the SBA comes in and hands out loans. He said the loan rate with the SBA was so low that they could take over the original mortgage, take over the cost of repair and the cost of addition, and the monthly payment would still be less than what he's paying now. Well, why not? Now it ended up that the mortgage was like twice the value of the house. It was there, but it was a smaller payment. Chug along. So watch out about project creep, add-ons, things like that. It's not a separate project. You got to close out that one permit before they could start up another one. Then the question would be is how many days in between? Oh, we just finalized you out on this one and you came in an hour later to add a room. Should you really have that close together? Knowing all along they were going to add a room and they just don't want to raise up the entire house, bring the whole old house into compliance. So you've got to watch out about that stuff. The house that I was talking about, it was already in compliance. It was built up high enough. HVAC, everything like that. It was on a raised slab that went up. Didn't need vents or anything. And they could just build on to the same level, take off and run. Didn't bother them as far as having to raise the house up. You got to have a good record keeping system, especially if you have the 2, 5, 10 period time. You got to keep up with all the permits and stuff that go up against it. And when does your cycle change as you move down? Because it's not a static time period that you might have in the ordinance. It's not 1990 to 2000. Nope. First permit's 91. So now it's 2001. And that will hold as it creeps up. And if they don't get anywhere near 50%, say in 1999, still got 2 years left, and they hit 40%, it's not it runs out in 2001, then they could add on to it. Then you take that 40% in 1999, and it goes 10 years from there. So now it's 2009 from 1999, 40% here as it chugs along. So it's a sliding target. It's a start, and you do stuff during that time period. But if they're not going to hit 50% during that 10 years, then you start a new 10 years. So in essence, you have the original, and then for each permit that comes along, you have another 10 years overlapping as it goes through. So record keeping. Be ready for complaints. You got the appeals process. You got people complaining about stuff. Why do you have rules above the minimum in a 5E? Well, one thing, they were created back in 1972, and it was a big compromise between this, that, and this, and this, and this, and fussing, all that kind of stuff. You can have higher rules. We've got zoning rules. Some people, some communities don't allow mobile homes anywhere in their jurisdiction. That's a higher standard. I don't complain about that one too much. As you go along, you have the historic districts. You got to put a certain face on your building to match all the others in those districts. Yeah, people do complain about that some, but not as severe as some other stuff. So it's usually when they want to get something done and they're bumping the rules, why do you have above minimums? Is the usual complaint on there. Once again, keep calm. Steady as you go. Don't get angry about stuff. Let them blow off steam around you. Just do your best not to get upset about it. As you go along, always stay, well, we could say stay professional. Shoot, I'm about to run out of slides. I got videos, but I don't know if they would show up. Different things. I got a real good one of flooding of a house. They had a security camera to watch the cat, and you see the cat running around. And then you see the floodwaters creeping in. You see the cat looking. My goodness, what's going on? The water come up, go out. Nice videos to keep up with. So keeping calm about what you do, keeping the records, know your ordinance, have processes written down, and probably get them wrote down to where, not to the extent of pick up pencil. Actually, it wouldn't be that. Type into computer, open up Word document. Yeah, it's probably too granular as far as doing things, but have a nice list of everything to look for, to do, names of books, the full, if it's a FEMA manual, you can have a full name with the numbers that go with it and the dates, and be able to click on it, maybe have a link, click and run with it. Now you're doing all of this stuff. So that's fine. Next, when do you get it done? Well, you've got everybody after the event wanting to build back, and it becomes a mad rush to let everybody know. So in 94, I told them when, let's see, we go back to, told not to enforce the rules. I continued to make a list of all the structures that are flooded, who was compliant and who was non-compliant in the areas. Because the flood that we had, on one creek, it was 6 to 10 feet higher than the 100. So anybody who had built to the standard at the time, they had 6 feet of water in them already. And we had a 3-foot freeboard. So they had 3 feet of water, 3 to 7 feet of water going through the house. It's easy. Just find all the new ones after a certain date and let them go. On there. On another creek, we were 14 feet over. So not enforce the rules, but I was creating a chart. So after a spell, they said, no, Brian, you're right. I was right about something. Right. That chairman of the county commission told me I was right. 4 days later, I found out what I was right about. Just passed my office. Said, you're right. So enforcing the rules. So having that list of everything. So systematically, we got some help, find out who's compliant, who's non-compliant, and had it all listed into a spreadsheet. So all I had to do is come down. They couldn't call because you wouldn't ever get through on the phone. You come down to our building office and they would ask real quick. We could say certain subdivisions. There was one that was flooded. If you're in this subdivision, build back because everybody's compliant in those areas. So we're trying to get it all done prior to the building permits. But this is 94. People actually followed rules a little bit better maybe back then. But today, who knows? They're rebuilding even before getting permits or just plowing through everything as you go along. So the preference is to get it done as early as possible. Be ahead of people to be able to tell them, oh no, go ahead and build back your house. Oh no, you got to do these certain things as you go along. And you're keeping going. But how long do you have to get it done? To find all those structures, to do all the analysis, to see the substantial damage on there. Preference as soon as you can. It's not something you sit back and take 15 years to do. So we got Georgia law on one end here. We have FEMA doing something else. And this is against the big disasters once they get declared. And it probably has to be a big flooding disaster. Not just, we could have the wind disaster or stuff like that, the big ones that we've had lately to come through. Told me to watch time. Okay. Fluid. Oh, back to FEMA. Coming through. So I've been listening to, I've been hearing reports of down, Logan. I forgot what storm was down there that hit Fort Myers. And I think it's Lee County down there too. Some massive hit of that area. And FEMA did some quick analysis. They're using data tools, data sets that technically we don't have at the state, and you locals don't have it either. They're using great big stuff, kind of like what they use for the flood insurance calculations. They're doing an analysis to estimate how many substantially damaged structures you have in your jurisdiction. Then they go and they select a couple of communities. One, I think it was Fort Myers in Lee County, that was selected to go visit. And they expect you, they said, per our calculations, you should have 1,000. When are you going to have that 1,000 analyzed? Oh, by the way, we're not telling you where that 1,000 are. We're not going to tell you anything. So you got to go and hunt for them. Look for them all around. And you'll be required to have quarterly reports going up to them, showing how many have been analyzed, completed, done, how many have been elevated, not elevated, stuff like that going on. How many were just flat out destroyed, removed. So you got to keep up with it. So on FEMA's perspective, you get it done as soon as you can. Georgia law side of things, not so much. On the Georgia law, whoever makes the application, does the construction, who's in charge of the project, of doing it, they're responsible. And I'm kind of covering up some, so let me get out of the picture just a little bit. The entity responsible for the development, owner of the house, they're supposed to follow the rules, whether you tell them to do it or not, whether you tell them wrong or not. Tell them right, you tell them wrong, doesn't make any difference. They're supposed to follow what's written. So on the state side, on the state of Georgia side, a person can build in violation, and we can come back 30 years later, whoever owns that structure at the time, and tell them to fix it, bring it into compliance, because it was built in violation. And when it's built in violation, building permits become null and void as soon as they violated a written ordinance on something. As soon as they violated that, they're in violation, and nothing, even though you might still have a permit issued for that structure, that permit's no good anymore. It just doesn't pop up as beware or watch out, destruction is coming your way. That's the state of Georgia. On the FEMA side, they're going to come visit you. And it's one of those jurisdictions down there, big fuss going on, that FEMA said, okay, as a community, you haven't been enforcing your rules. This is against CRS. We're going to rescind your class 5 and move it to a class 10. Lots of homes, they've got a big insurance problem down there already, and now their insurance rates are going to go up potentially 25%. A lot of folks upset down there. Well, they kind of halted on their FEMA halted on their moves to pull that CRS. Major discussions about getting everything done down there. So FEMA is going to be coming down heavy. So if you're not in CRS, they'll come in and say, we're going to suspend you. We're going to put you on probation. We're going to do something to you to get this done right away. So it's a big push on their end. Is they've been in operation for 50 years. 72, 82, yeah. 50 years now, a little more. And maybe the thought was, by now, they would have had enough substantially damaged homes that all the structures would have been elevated up and they wouldn't be substantially damaged anymore. Or they might be, but they're all in compliance. The anticipation was all these structures would be in compliance by now. And they're not. We still have homes in DeKalb County that are 50, 60 years old. They're not in compliance. They never sustained substantial damage level as things go along. So it still keeps popping up. So FEMA's coming down, get it done right away. We at the state here to help. We're looking at some various ways of getting you lots of people in case it's big, widespread disaster, something like that. And there is this thing called DR something, 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 you know, one could probably tell me, but it's funds that can help you get people in, except it's only for 6 months from the declared disaster 6 months later. So you got to jump on it quick. So What do you do after an event? Know your ordinance. Instead, just read it. Read and know your ordinance. Make a checklist. Make a checklist to follow, spell it out, and do it, and keep records. So that's Brian. That's me. State of Georgia, floodplain management, giving you another webinar. We're all done. My clock says 4 minutes left.
Yes.
And do I pop the last slide for them, or
Yes.
do you want me to wait? All right, last
Please
slide
go
here.
ahead.
And let me get out of the way here. Maybe I'll just turn off my camera. That's what I'll do.
All
More
right. Thank you,
camera.
Brian, for that very
All right.
informative webinar. I hope everyone has enjoyed the presentation as much as I have. We will keep the chat open for a few more minutes. So if you do have any questions that you weren't able to ask, throw those in the chat along with your email address so that we may follow up with you. Please mark July 10th from 12 to 1 on your calendar for our next Lunch and Learn webinar, Fund Your Flood Project. Where's the money? Please make note of the registration link for the next webinar and the survey link in the chat on the screen. Again, we appreciate you completing the survey so that we may improve these webinars. We are offering one continuing education credit for today's session available to CFMs that completed the polling questions and provide their name and email address in the chat now. A copy of the presentation will be emailed to all attendees. If you're requesting continuing education credits, those certificates will be emailed separately. Once more, our next Lunch and Learn series will be on July 10th. So please be on the lookout for that invitation. With that, thank you again for everyone for attending today's event. And for those that don't have any further questions, this ends our Lunch and Learn webinar. Thank you so much and have a great day.
All quiet.
Yeah, it is very quiet.
Yeah, we're not, Aaron's not talking.
Yeah.
I
No.
don't have a story to tell.
No stories.